all that crunch.
Start.
Oh, there's steps of transformation. You've got it. Okay, we can send this around, and you can have a look. We've supposedly got some coming. I think it has a different looking cover now. So are we on?
We're on.
Okay. So welcome to everybody. Sorry you had to wait out there on YouTube and Facebook and other places. We're actually in the process of handing out to the group here how to start making an honest and realistic confession with something we put together here. Father Thomas Newstrom was very keen to have something like this for himself. And it was something that over the years has been very useful. It's in the track rack here. And I had fresh ones made up today because I know that it moves. But as I said to the group before you all came on, this is a good way to sort of become acquainted with things as we try to come to terms with the passions and work on identifying our vices and overcoming them with virtues. But make sure that this is something that you sort of internalize so it doesn't just become a laundry list when you're actually making your confession. Okay? We'll shoot somewhere out here. Here we go. If you have one and you don't want another one, that's fine too. Last thing before we get down to it is who of this group does not have what I have in my hand? Okay? You don't have one? You've been here all this time?
Yeah. What is it?
Matthew, you don't have one? Okay. Who else doesn't have one? Okay. Okay. Michelle, do you know where they are? They're in a box in the hospitality room. Who doesn't have one that needs one per family? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 of them, okay? They're very pricey, and they're very good, so don't lose it, okay? Works kind of a bit like a flashcard, but again, they're very, very good for learning orthodoxy and a catechetical tool brought to us by Faith Tree. Okay? We're good? Okay, I'm going to sit, so we may have to adjust the... things. Okay, everybody has one? All right, great. So, for those of you that are seekers, sometime before Christmas, maybe the Sunday before Christmas, Nativity, I will admit catechumens, so you can formally be admitted as a catechumen. The thing about being admitted as a catechumen is that at that stage, I mean, you literally fall under the umbrella of the church. You have a status and a standing, and in fact, God forbid, but if you were to die before you were baptized or chrismated or however you're being received here, you're entitled to a full Orthodox funeral. So between now and then, we'll figure out who's at the right stage for being admitted as a catechumen. We'll, as I said earlier, we'll have Maria Tekla here next week. She's going to be showing you how prayer ropes are made, but she'll also be sharing with you about how to use it, how you pray it. It's not a rosary, and there's a whole different way in which the Orthodox approach this. So that's going to take us to another level next week as we're moving towards sort of internalizing how we live as Orthodox Christians. So, when you are a catechumen and you're being prepared for Holy Illumination, baptism, chrismation, and the Eucharist, you'll make your confession the evening before. I won't give you absolution. I'll hear your confession, but absolution is going to be given when? The next day, when you're baptized. Most of you will be received by holy baptism. Some of you will be received by chrismation, which is a practice in this archdiocese. That means that you come from a tradition in which you were baptized with water in the name of the Holy Trinity, and you've got the ticket, you've got the proof that you were. Okay. There's a lot of debate going on in the Orthodox world now about how we receive converts, because some people come from traditions converting to Orthodoxy in which that would be normative, but in fact they're not. They may have been baptized in the name of the Mother, Lover, Friend, or the Creator, Redeemer, Sanctifier, or something, and they even have a certificate that says Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, but that's not the formula that was used. So it's serious business. So anyway, to prepare for that first confession, between now and when you're close to being received, you need to be thinking about those things in your life that you would like to bring forward before God, to include in that particular confession. But as I said last week, that doesn't mean that you then beat yourself to death, because as you continue to grow as an Orthodox Christian, you begin to remember other things. I think last week I said it's kind of a bit like a splinter in your finger. It can be pretty deep in there, and it takes a long time for that thing to surface so you can extract it. Okay, that makes sense? That's why we have the phrase, for these and all other sins which I cannot now remember. But there's a difference between not being able to remember and making sure that somehow or another, I'm not going to disclose this, but I hope that somehow or another it all gets covered. Give me an example.
Like some kind of obfuscation.
Mm-hmm.
Some kind of obfuscation, like dodging the whatever you have going on in your life, as opposed to just not being aware.
Yeah. Okay. So why is that important that we be honest before God?
You're still lying to yourself.
Yeah. And remember last week we put all that emphasis upon healing? And in confession in the Orthodox Church, it's not juridical as it is in the Latin or Anglican tradition, right? Or I guess they're High Church Lutherans who are making their confession. Martin Luther, by the way, as I think I said last week, actually believed it was a sacrament of the Church, okay, and thought it was probably necessary. Okay?
So there's no point in
There you
not
go.
saying
Yes,
it.
okay. Yeah, why bother God with this, you know? Yeah, he knows all these things. Yeah, but it's just as you said, you got to be honest with yourself. Okay? Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, somehow or another, I can just never go to confession because I got all this laundry list. Okay? Well, that's where I just want to sort of spend a little bit of time. I was probably 12 when I made my first confession. And those of you that don't know already, you know, this was BC, that's before conversion to Orthodoxy. I grew up as an Episcopalian, a particular kind of Episcopalian. We used to call them nosebleed Episcopalians. That meant that the Mass was so high on Sunday that you had the altitude effect, you know, and you got a nosebleed. So we learned all those things because we believed that we were in the Catholic tradition. It's just been forgotten by a bunch of people, and that was our vocation, which was to remind them of their true identity. So I was probably 12, and I remember confessions in my home parish was heard in a side chapel. And I mean, it was learned by rote. And I think that probably, if I can remember right, it was like what you find in here. There was a laundry list of things that I did. Over the years, as an Episcopal priest, I heard a lot of kids' confessions at church camp. I remember once a little boy, I don't know, he may have been 8, 9, something like that. He confessed adultery. And I asked him if he knew what that meant, and he said no, but it was on the list they gave us. So, it needs to be your confession. Again, the list can help you sort of remember certain things, but don't just make it like, a list, all right? There have been times in my life, making my confession over the years, in which I would say I got extremely serious about confession in my years as a seminarian. We had a practice where I went to seminary in Wisconsin of priests just being available in one of the side chapels. I remember this particular chapel very well because you had to go up creaking wood steps. There were 2, maybe 3 tiers to get up there. And there was not a proper confessional box like you'd think of and see in movies, but there was a priest sitting there, and there was a prie-dieu, a prayer desk. And, it was one of the faculty who were priests rotating to hear confessions. Well, where I went to seminary, the 100th Archbishop of Canterbury, Michael Ramsey, retired from that post, and that was a big deal, and he came across the big pond to teach us theology. And it was just simply a remarkable blessing to have him. He had, by the way, a very, very strong tilt towards Eastern Orthodoxy, and anybody will tell you that about Michael Ramsey. Well, I went creeping up those wooden stairs, I remember once, and I looked and I thought, oh, I can't do this. It was him. He was taking his rotation turn hearing confessions. And I remember it was a real panic. It's like, I don't want him to know these things about me.
Did you creep back down?
Good question, Michael. I tried. He turned and called out my name. And there was, no way out of this one. So that was personally in my life when I really did have to come to terms with something, but it left a mark on me. And when then I was ordained the first time around, I think I was probably pretty well prepared to hear confessions. We even did mock confessions in class. The professor had a list of things, and somebody would read them off, and we'd pretend we were the priest, and you got chewed up by your classmates and the professor and everybody else. But it was all good, But I decided, we were in Denver, we lived in Denver, that was my first parish. I wanted some time with somebody that had probably heard a gazillion confessions, and so we had an octogenarian priest who was attached to our parish, and I made an appointment to go and have tea, but we didn't have tea, we had sherry instead. It was a really, really good thing for me to do, because he left again things that I've never forgotten. It's like a brand. He had been, by the way, the rector of St. Anthony of Padua Episcopal Church in New Jersey, and you're probably wondering how in the world an Episcopal church get a name like St. Anthony of Padua. The reason is they were Italian Roman Catholics that got mad at their bishop, and they took their property, went down the street to the Episcopalian bishop, and he received them all. Okay?
What is an octogenarian priest?
He was 80 years plus, yeah.
Okay.
And in the conversation, he said, well, to remember certain things. And I'm sharing this with you because it's left a mark on me, and I think it will put you more at ease. He said, people think that their sins are unique to them, but of course they aren't. And it's kind of like the saying about heresies. There are no new heresies. They're just the old ones that come in new clothes. It's the same old thing, okay? So all of us are subject to the temptations. And you remember in Orthodoxy, in the earlier sessions, I said we get tempted and we have the thoughts, you remember?
Yes, Father.
Logos moi.
Yes. Okay, the Greek word, very nice, okay? So instead of banishing the thoughts, as human beings, we like to toy with it. And who's the first in our family who toyed with it? Eve. Yeah, we leave Adam out of it. It was Eve. Okay? She's the one who was there. And Adam played his part all right. But it was Eve. And what was the lie that the Satan, the tempter, in Genesis, delivered to Eve? And she toyed with it.
That God didn't want you to eat from the tree because then you would become like Him.
Yes. And then you will have no need for Him. Okay? So the temptation was no need for God. No need for accountability in our lives. We'll run our own show. Thank you very much. But we're living in a time and in a culture in which so many people are operating in a kind of Pelagian heresy mode. What's that? These darn Orthodox people, we have the weirdest words. Okay? What is it?
Pelagianism is like, I believe the belief that, all you have to do is be a good person and you can go to heaven.
Yes, okay. And, when it comes to like a relationship with God, it's like God's busy, right? So we don't want to bother Him, right? Because we're in control. Got it? That's a very nice definition, Gavin. Okay? So all of us basically are Pelagian heretics. Given to our own devices, we'll run our own show. Thanks very much. And we're all a bunch of train wrecks when we try to operate like that, right? I'm getting a lot of nods for those of you that can't see it on camera. There are a lot of nods that are going on out there, okay? So that's contributed to so many people who are in our current culture searching every which way, right? Yeah?
Yes, Father.
Okay. So, I was told people think that their sins are unique. They're not unique. And then this priest looked at me and he said, and of course yours aren't unique either, are they? Okay, well, I'll do that to you. Are your sins unique? Father Chad, I've done some pretty terrible things in my life, okay? Well, as the person who's most likely going to hear your confessions, my confession before you and the faithful that I have a cure of souls of here, I was reminded that when I'm hearing confessions, I will have either committed the sin myself, or I will have at least contemplated it in one form or another. Can that be true? Yes, if we're honest with ourselves, right? So, what's that Greek word?
Logos moi.
Yeah, I'll tell you, this is some kind of group now, you see. Okay? So, we get the thoughts, it's here, and just like a train, okay? We then move in and we couple with that thought, right? Okay? So if you've got a train and it couples, the engine's going to do what?
Work harder. Work harder.
Sometimes doesn't have to work hard at all. What's the motion going on here?
It's going to pull you in that direction.
You're going to get pulled in that direction, right? Okay? That's what coupling with the train does, right? Okay? You get pulled along. All right?
Yes. Yes, Father.
Yeah. Okay? So then there it is. So that's the classical understanding of how we commit sin. We have the thought, and then we toy with the thought, and then eventually we engage it. Okay? We engage it. And we often engage it with, it's not so bad after all. And one of the things that really operates within us is Well, I use it when I preach about the Gadarene pigs, which is 3 or 4 times a year. It's the Las Vegas thing, okay? We lose our identity when we go through that process because I could use a break, right? Does it really matter? All of those things we toy with, okay? I've talked about how we are saved by rhythm and routine in Orthodoxy. What is that? What do I mean by that?
Well, the example that you give, I think, is following the fast calendar and getting into the
Okay.
rhythm that way.
We have a way that keeps us on track through the year, through the seasons, through the week, through the day. There is this rhythm, okay? And when people break out of the rhythm of living I have to get Amy there, an observant Orthodox Christian life, like an observant Orthodox Jew. When an Orthodox Jew is asked by someone who's not Jewish, why do you do that? Or why do you not do that? What's the answer?
Because I'm an Orthodox Jew.
Here it is. Okay, that's the response we give as Orthodox Christians. Then if you want to give them a little further explanation, that's fine. But don't react and don't get into a debate. Just simply matter of fact. That's how it is. And that's because we have received a 2,000-year tradition that does what?
Not change.
It produces saints. Okay? I had fun actually last Sunday in that homily. I even forgot my little thing at the end, had to go back to the altar and retrieve it. But when I spoke about Saint Maria of Paris, remember what I said?
Chain smoking.
Yeah, you had a chain-smoking, divorcee, hard-drinking woman who's now a saint on the wall. There's hope for all of us, right? Father Aaron at St. Mary's Wichita told me about someone who was 14, rode his bike to church, okay, with his permission from his mom. And when Father Aaron asked the question, so why do you want to be here? And he pointed to the icons on the wall. And he said, I want to be one of those. Well, there it is, right? But that means that if you and I are engaged in spiritual warfare, that means we've got to work extra hard at putting our interior life in a rhythm, in a routine, so we're not derailed so badly. Right? This parish has a particular challenge, and it's miles. I wrote about miles in the e-news that should have gone out today. Yeah, it's a pretty big circumference we've got. That's hard to form the kind of community that allows us to have that kind of grace-saving rhythm and routine. That's why Orthodox Jews I so admired when I lived in New York. They knew how to sort of take control of their lives and create a space where they could thrive. You and I have a much greater challenge because we're living in a very secularized, westernized, head-tripping world. So that's our challenge. And that's where we're going tonight, okay, in preparing for our confessions. So it just means being honest, getting into the rhythm and the routine. All right? Good so far? So when this priest told me that in my first year of hearing confessions, I would certainly hear every single sin imaginable, with the possible exception of murder, and he said, I'm most likely going to hear that one. Okay? He was correct. I heard the confession of a Vietnam veteran, and that was on his list as a soldier that he had killed. And he had never brought that to confession before. And it needed to be brought for his soul's salvation. But there are other ways in which I hear murder, right? Give me an example.
Abortion.
Hatred.
Okay, abortion is one. All right. Okay. What else?
Hatred.
What's it?
Hatred.
Yeah. Take that a little bit further.
Well,
So
you hate someone, you might as well have murdered them. Right?
Yeah. You hate somebody so much you wish they were dead, right?
Yeah.
Okay? Here's a distinction between East and West. In the Western tradition, if you have a thought, well, it's a thought. You didn't act, okay? But in Orthodoxy, all that's going on, you need to bring to confession. So even if you didn't actually murder someone, but you've had the thought, you bring it to confession. But why do you bring it to confession?
Christ commanded it when he said, if any man who has hatred in their heart is guilty of murder.
Okay? So it is one of the 10 Commandments, right? Thou shalt not kill, right? Okay? All right. So I think you'll remember previously, again, in the West, they have what's called the just war theory. So you can kill, and that's okay. It just gets dismissed as the lesser of two evils. In Orthodoxy, we don't have that. We recognize that sometimes you must defend, and that involves soldiers, nation against nation, all of those kinds of things. Someone attacking your children, all of those things. And we pray for the military at all of our services, right? Okay. But that means that if someone is killed in war, that soldier then goes under penance, does not approach the chalice, takes that to confession. That way we don't pretend in any way that is not the violation of a commandment and putting ourselves in a spiritual danger. Does that make some sense to you all?
I have a question, Father. What about someone who's involved in a traffic accident and someone was inadvertently?
Yes,
was accidental?
it is the same. And I know a priest in Colorado who did that. And he knew instantly that he needed to put himself under penance and go to confession because there had been a death.
Well, you probably feel incredibly guilty as if it was your fault anyways.
Yeah. Yep. And there is this sense. We had Deacon Samson Nash leading the clergy synaxis recently, and he even went to confession as a physician. If one of his patients died, he's had this encounter with death, and for his soul's sake, he does bring that to confession. He didn't intentionally kill somebody.
Yeah, he wasn't the cause, it was just happened. Yeah.
It happened. And since he was involved in that, as he said, his practice is, he mentions that in confession. Yes?
Does that apply to miscarriage?
Yes, a miscarriage is again something that gets a lot of pastoral discussion now, because although the intention of many of the prayers when there's been a miscarriage is to do exactly what I just said. There was not an intention to kill, but there was a death that was involved of a human. So the wording of that sounds pretty harsh now, and so most of the synods have given us, this archdiocese for one, it's not a revision of the intent, but it's a revision of the wording, so that it's a pastoral response, because it doesn't diminish the fact that it's a tragedy. And any of you that have been through miscarriages in your marriage or in your families know it's a trauma.
So it'd be the same thing for life support. Take somebody off of life support,
Yes,
same thing.
yeah.
So would you go under a penance then for that?
It isn't that you go under a penance for that, but that often the choice will be. In becoming a mother, by the way, a woman becomes a co-creator with God, and so that's why when there is a birth, the prayers at the hospital. I don't know if I've done that with anybody here yet. It's a lovely prayer, but the woman gets 3 sips of holy water, and she enters into her, Brits call it the confinement, okay, a 40-day period. Okay, is that because she's unclean? No, it's because she has come so close to God in giving birth, she doesn't need communion. And if you look, even at what modern science tells us about a newborn, when is their immune system basically fully developed?
About 40 days.
At about 40 days. Yeah. So again, wisdom of primitive Christianity. So I try very hard in parishes to get new moms to observe that. But it's really hard because our culture goes completely against that. But I know I've had them in the parish, I've had them in the seminary, the women who've actually done that. Now, of course, they go to the doctor for the checkup and those kinds of things. But the ones that have really observed it, they find it really enriching and very meaningful. Then at the end of 40 days, what do?
Welcome. Baptism.
The child is presented in the temple. Oh, sound a little Jewish? Yes, okay, it's observance there. It's one of the favorite things I do as a priest, by the way. And I can't wait till we kind of tone things up a little bit at All Saints, where the priest actually is bringing the child in, and there are three points of stopping in the church, okay? And then the mom is restored to communion. And in some traditions, the child is baptized shortly thereafter, maybe even all of that at once. But generally now we're not so anxious about it unless there's a health problem or something like that, okay? All right, so all of those things are covered in confession, right? Okay, so let's have a look at this, okay? You got the sheet? There's a little commentary there at first. I have, over the years, had people come to confession, and they come because they're in an Orthodox mindset that you have to go to confession before you're going to go to communion. Our Archdiocese has done a nice job of sort of decoupling that because it gets abused, to which Orthodox Christians don't come to the chalice at all, once a year at the most or something. That's a distortion. It's one of those things, again, that Father Alexander Schmemann wrote about so beautifully, that in fact in the early church, if you gathered at the Divine Liturgy and did not receive communion, it would have seemed quite peculiar, because it's Christ himself who gives us that invitation. But I have on many occasions, well, I'll say several, okay, had someone come to confession and say to me, I really can't think of anything. I just want you to give me absolution. Well, I have a standard thing that I do. And I say, then I want you to go home, and if it's a woman, I say, ask your husband. And if it's a man, I say, ask your wife to help you prepare for confession. Ask your children, ask your co-workers, where you need a little help in preparing for confession. Well, it never fails. Why is that?
Because we can't.
Blind to ourselves.
Blind youth.
These are the people that you live with, okay? All of us have a public face and a private face. Yeah. And we lash out and say things to those who should be sacramentally most in tune with us. The husband and wife through marriage, our children, our grandchildren, co-workers, all those people parents that share, your roof often, or at least your family tree, all of those things. They're the ones that get it, the sting, quickest and fastest, right? Okay. So if you're really struggling like that, well, I just told you, ask some people who live with you or work with you, and I guarantee you they'll, as they say in Oklahoma, they'll help you out. Okay? All right. I have 3 other things that I do when people are struggling. I am not, by the way, an intrusive priest. Some of you have made your confessions to me more than once already in my short second tenure here. And you know, I don't delve into things. Very quickly, I'm being recorded here, so somebody may want to challenge me, but I think I'm right. There is, especially in a Greek tradition, the kind of probing thing that often, if you're going to a monastery for confession, that things will get really probed, asking you lots and lots of questions, and often very personal kinds of questions, okay? The point of that's to really kind of draw you out, okay? It's not just, you got a list, you've got these things, all right? Some of those times the confessor will actually tell you your sins because they know that most of us fall into that category. There's a Russian tradition as well. And there can be, I think, through the influence of the sort of Western juridical thing, sometimes pretty harsh side to things. I discovered a book called Romanian Spiritual Fatherhood some time ago. I've given away so many copies. I have a brand new one because the last one went out of my hands and didn't come back, and I needed it. I find that my particular approach as a father confessor is a very Romanian style one, and I'm speaking in generalities, by the way, so I'm sure I'll get some hate mail and some correction from somebody here. But the Romanian spiritual fatherhood is the priest has the obligation to educate his people well enough that they have what I would call an informed conscience. And that means that your conscience is actually working within you. And when you do something horrible, your conscience is so prepared, you get a ding, okay? Do you know what I'm talking about? Does that make sense? It's kind of like, oh, I wish I hadn't said that. Or I wish I hadn't done that. Or maybe it even comes later, okay?
Does it have to do with kenosis and prelest?
Yes, you better tell them what that means.
Well, kenosis is emptying of the self. And it's the beginning, basically the beginning of being able to accept theosis.
Okay.
And prelest is what you're subject to, which is a spiritual delusion that happens when you haven't properly emptied yourself out and you haven't properly received theosis, and that has to do with the fact that you're being assaulted from basically thoughts that come from a demonic realm.
Let me give you a phrase. This will probably get locked into your head, okay? There's no theosis without kenosis. What's that?
You can't fill up a full cup.
Okay?
It has to be an empty cup.
So you can't make spiritual progress in your life, theosis, without the emptying of the self. So it's the phrase from John the Forerunner, John the Baptist, less of me, more of him. Okay? We're getting there. All right. So, to come back to this thing, the very last paragraph, it says here, it's sad but true that our parents, spouse, siblings, and close friends are generally more able to make a more realistic and honest confession for us than we can for ourselves. To know thyself is painful, a process we desperately try to avoid, with the devil cheering us on. Let us pray, God, help me to become who I am, a beloved child of God created in his image and likeness. Okay? Does that help you all? So keep in mind with all of this, it's not a punitive thing. This is for the healing of your soul. Okay? This is to get us all well. With me? Okay. So, sometimes when people have made their confession to me, they'll circle back and say, Father, do you remember when I was making my confession, I said? I'll give you an honest response to that, okay? What do you think it is?
No.
Yeah, and I don't just say no. One of the things that this 80-some-year-old priest told me is, you will discover that priests have the grace of forgetfulness when it comes to confessions. I was the most doubtful young priest imaginable sitting there. I thought, yeah, sure, okay? It's true. I don't remember. But even if I might have some little inkling, the answer is still no, because when you have made your confession, the seal which is on me is also on you, okay? What if you happen to overhear someone in the parish making their confession?
We're still not allowed.
Oh my gosh, I just heard this, Old Clara, she's kind of deaf and a little bit loud. Yeah. The seal is on you as well, okay? You don't talk about it, you don't mention it, nothing, all right? We all understand that, okay? You want to ask my wife a question? Ask her about the priest that she's married to and the seal. Sometimes, yeah, well, she'll, yeah. Even at our house, or the church, sometimes people will say, did Father tell you X, Y, and Z? And the answer is no, because I don't need to burden her with that. But B, there's just pastoral kinds of things that's between me and my parishioners. It's not a home conversation. Not that she's not good. I mean, you'll see next week. All right? So we're good so far? This clock. All right. So he's outlined for us here, and he uses the words self-examination. Okay? Self-examination means turning it to have a look at ourselves. Who am I? Well, we have that answer. It's in the positive. But we recognize that sin is anything that separates us from the love of God, anything that diminishes that light which is in us. Our first parents, Adam and Eve, were clothed in the light, the doxa, the glory of God. But through their disobedience, by partaking of that which was forbidden to them, Satan introduces into our world sin and death. The consequences of sin is death. I said in the homily last Sunday, Adam's vocation was to bring us as human beings into perfect union with our Creator. He failed. But the second Adam, who is Jesus Christ, has achieved that pathway for you and for me. But because we are created with free will to make the choice, God doesn't control us like some puppeteer. We have to make the choice, okay? And sometimes we slip. We fall down, we get up. But we still make that choice. So, he outlines these things. There's a list which is there. You can go through the list. We always start with pride, because pride is connected to Eve's fall. Go ahead, you will be like him, and therefore you will have no need for him. Okay? That goes down to things like idolatry, profanity, irreverence, disobedience, hate, impurity, theft, discontent. Let me tell you, I used to think about discontent a lot as a confessor. I hear an enormous amount of discontent in people now. They have so much, and yet they are so miserably unhappy. So you may want to put a little more attention on that. And there are things like deceit. I've given an awful lot of thought about deceit, because I'm hoping in the parish to have a movie night in which we're going to watch Man of God about St. Nectarios. And some of my faithful have already told me, Father, when I saw it, I was so depressed afterwards because I lost confidence in the hierarchy of the church. We're now keeping the feast of St. John Chrysostom. He was lied about, slandered, banished, and sent into exile. But the truth prevails, okay? So that's an important lesson about orthodoxy. There's no perfection this side of the veil. It is both a divine and human institution. So we don't lose sight of the divine, but the human side, that's best dealt with in confession. And those kinds of things which really bring us down. And sometimes when the betrayal is the betrayal of Judas. Judas was one of the hand-picked apostles, disciples of Jesus Christ. And who betrays him? One of his own. One who is closest to him. One who has been there for 3 years receiving his teaching. And so many people now forget when they come to confession to actually address this particular section that's there. How have you been wounded by those who are closest to you? That kind of betrayal is big. And a lot of people carry it for years and years and years. And confession is an opportunity to actually discover that part of who you are and bring it forward. Okay? So, a little last bit here. I have had people say to me, Father, I have done such a terrible thing. I know you will think less of me if I mention this in confession. Well, I've already told you about the grace of forgetfulness, okay? But I don't mean this to diminish anything about you, because I have to deal with it myself. Your sins are my sins. So I just want everybody here that I'm the confessor to hear that. If I haven't committed that sin, as I said, I've at least contemplated in one way or another. And there's nothing unique about our sins. But we need to be honest about it and bring it forward. And I can tell you, it's not that I think less of someone, it's complete opposite. Because I know from myself how hard it is to bring certain things. It's like when I went creeping up those wooden stairs, and as I said, I got caught trying to creep back down because they were so darn loud. I had no choice. Now, I could have made the decision to omit certain things. But I'd also said the pre-prayers, which was like to help me to remember and not to intentionally hide that which needs to be brought forward. Okay? So we'll sort of wrap this up for the virtual side, and I'll spend, I know time's precious with the miles, a little bit of time dealing some Q&A with all of you, because you've been pretty silent here. But I've dumped a lot of things on you. Okay? And any of you who are watching virtually, when you see me face to face, please bring those questions forward, or you can email me or text me, and I'll get back to you. Okay? All right, we can go off.